Hello, and welcome to We Speak CVE, a free podcast from the CVE program. On this podcast, we'll talk with people from the cybersecurity community about what else, cybersecurity and vulnerability management, and the CVE catalog of vulnerabilities. If you didn't know, the CVE program's mission is to identify, define, and catalog publicly disclosed cybersecurity vulnerabilities.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the CVE podcast. I'm Shannon Sabens, and I'm your host today. And I have a special guest with me, Milland from NVIDIA. Milland, will you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Shannon, for inviting me today. So my name is Milind Kulkarni. I work in the PSIRT team at NVIDIA. I've been with NVIDIA since 2018, and I worked in different companies before that at Dell, at HP, and Symantec. So pretty much we have a PSIRT team at NVIDIA, and we work with external researchers for managing vulnerabilities and working closely with finders and getting their reports. And the whole idea is to make sure that our products are more secured and closely working with researchers. So we have a small team that works with researchers, and we have an established PSIRT process in our company.
So I invited Milland today. Thank you, Milland. I invited Milland today because I'm interested in the topic of assisting security researchers with good guidance about reporting to PSIRTs and how to have a good collaboration with PSIRTs. Milland and I've known each other for several years. I think Milland is a wonderful PSIRT leader. So I've invited him, and today our podcast is really targeted at researchers and what to expect when you're reporting a vulnerability to a vendor, and how to interpret the responses that you see and how to get the best result from your report. So I guess we should start with pre-disclosure and how to make contact with a vendor. So using NVIDIA as the example, Milland, do you want to start and talk a little bit about how researchers new to the vulnerability reporting space can get in touch with you?
Sure.
And or other PSIRTs like you?
Yeah, sure. So researchers, there are a lot of researchers. There are a different type of researchers. There are academic researchers, then there are researchers who do this for hobby, and there are also professional researchers. So they do a lot of hard work, and we really appreciate their work. And the whole thing is, like, if they find some issues in any products, in NVIDIA products or any other vendor products, we encourage them to contact the vendors first. So that the whole idea is, like, when they find this issue, they can work with the vendor, they can submit their findings with their proof of concepts or their research, whatever it is. And then we can work with them to have a fix ready for our customers, and then we can disclose this in a coordinated fashion. So there are different ways that researchers can contact the vendors. Usually vendors who have a good footprint of customers, usually they would have like a product security page somewhere on their website. So you can Google and find it, and it will have a listing on how to contact them. It may be their security email address, or maybe some, usually also like smaller companies, they go through their technical support teams as well. So they have a contact on how researchers or finders can reach out to their product security teams. So that is one way. Then another way is also you can look at MITRE's CVE.org website, where participating CNAs, like CVE Numbering Authorities, which are companies that are into this program, they have a list of directory, and they have list of contacts as well. So that is also maintained by the CVE program. So you can see the list of all the companies and their contacts and their security pages. And it is also well maintained by the CVE program team. So those are two things I would recommend. If you cannot find the contact of a particular vendor or a company, Then another approach would be to contact your CERT. And Shannon, maybe you have more experience to that. Maybe you can talk about that, how it can be done. But these are the two avenues I would think. Going through the company's website, find a security contact, or going through the MITRE CVE page, CVE.org page, and find the partners and their listing. So Shannon, do you want to talk about the CERT and how they can be contacted, or how the researchers can reach out to the CERT?
Yeah, I will add to that. Just, when I've had any difficulty reaching a vendor, and even, I've tried SecureAd or SecurityAd or, these options to find a PSIRT team for those PSIRT, did not, where the details were not readily apparent. But also I've had good success going when I knew the vendor was in a particular country, going to a country CERT and asking the country CERT to help me make contact with the vendor. They've been tremendously useful. They've been a wonderful resource, and I don't know that everybody always thinks of the country CERTs right away. But in my experience, country CERTs are really friendly toward researchers and can be a wonderful bridge between security research and a vendor. Both kind of smoothing communications, and also where there may be language barriers. That's been very helpful as well. So country CERT contact, if you've exhausted other avenues, very helpful.
So just to add to that point, so once the contact is made, usually we respond within like 1 business day, just to acknowledge the report, so that researchers know that, oh yes, they received the report and they are investigating, and they probably will get a case number for their report findings. So that is like a two-way communication that happens, if, at least at the NVIDIA side. So the researchers get a sense that, oh, their report has correctly been sent to the email address that is on the website, and they are assured that their report is being looked by the vendor.
And if the vendor doesn't offer you a case number, ask for it. Sometimes they don't always offer it. They think of it as, an internal tool, but ask for a case number, ask for a tracking number, just for your follow-up correspondence. I think that's helpful. Let's talk about what to include in a report. Sometimes I have seen reports from researchers that may be very detailed in some aspects, but are some highly technical aspects, but maybe missing some basic aspects like what version of the product or what OS version did you test on? Milland, do you have good guidance for researchers about what to include in their report for optimal and timely response?
Yes. So I think this is a very important point, because when the researchers find something, they have very good information, which can be very easy, or it can be very complicated. Like there are different things that you have to do to reproduce the issue. So as a vendor, we have an established process where we get all this information, where it is good to have quality report, so that at one go we can have all the information, and it will help us to reproduce the issue, and the turnaround time is less to review the report and create a fix, and roll out the fix to customers and disclose a CVE. So usually in our case, what we have done is we have designed a form, like a web form on our website. If you go to nvidia.com/security, and there is a report vulnerability section. So there is a form that we have designed specifically for researchers and finders, and it will ask you for some basic information like your contact, email address, then what is the product that you're reporting, because a lot of big companies have hundreds of products. So we exactly want to know which product you have reproduced the issue, or which findings are these belong to which product. And we also give a list of all the products in the form, so you can easily go and select the product name. Then we also ask for a version number, like Shannon mentioned. Version is also really important, because at a time we support like 5 or 6 different versions of the same product. So we exactly want to know which version you were or the researchers were using to reproduce the issue. So we can exactly go to that version or the source code and see where the problem is. Operating system is also important, like Windows or Linux, or which operating system was used to find the vulnerability or the issue. Then we also, on the form, we also ask for like a high level summary of the issue and the steps to reproduce. That is really important. So our team can go through those steps and exactly reproduce the issue that the finders or the researchers have seen in their environment. Because each environment can be different. So the steps, if we get the steps, then that is really helpful. Then also we would like to know, like, is there any plans for disclosures? If this is going to be disclosed or presented at a conference, or you're going to publish a paper for this. So just to get an idea, like what is the time frame that is available to fix the issue for our information. And then also we like our researchers to, if they want to get acknowledged, like we usually give mention their name in our security advisories on our webpage as well. Next, we have an acknowledgement page on our security website as well. So we mention the name of the researchers who helped to find these issues and worked with us. So we also get their names if they want their name to be included in our security advisories when we publish a fix. And then there is also a way where you can upload screenshots or files, supporting files like proof of concepts. You can attach those artifacts to the form and submit the form to us. So we can get all this information through a web form. There is also another way, if you're comfortable with the email, you can also send an email with our email contact that is also on our website. And you can use a PGP key for encryption if you want a secured communication. So those are two ways that we have provided for our users and researchers, so they can share these findings with us.
I'm really glad you brought it up about what if you want to present your findings later. You have a conference that you want to speak at. I think that is something that's valuable for researchers, and I think it can be something that's valuable for vendors. But I'm glad you brought it up because I want to make sure that both parties have level set expectations of the process. Of course, it's not possible in most cases to fix a vulnerability overnight, and you don't want to be putting so tight a deadline on the vendor that they don't have time to investigate and vet, and you don't necessarily want to hijack their build schedule. They have other important, not that the vulnerability is not important, but other also important issues that they're working on for their customers. But making sure that you have level set expectations about what the time frame is for a fix. And so if you're going to present, telling the vendor when you want to present will give them a better sense of, hey, we've got to try to fit this, into our schedule in this, in this time frame, and can we reasonably do it? Pressure for pressure's sake, I think, it doesn't help the situation. But when they understand, hey, I have a conference, I want to go to this conference and I want to talk about this vulnerability, I want to be able to talk about my research at that conference, I think that's a meaningful data point for a vendor to have. And at all times, these communications can just kind of smooth the gears between you as a researcher and the vendor. Yeah. Let's see what else I wanted to talk about. Sometimes I see a little bit of confusion about when do you get a CVE, or really even sort of what is the CVE. Of course, the CVE is not for the patch. The CVE is for the vulnerability, but we often don't see a CVE until patch time, because that's the time, that we document and that we put out the advisories. So Milland, when you have conversations with researchers and you're setting their expectations about when they might see a CVE for a vetted vulnerability report that they've provided to NVIDIA, tell me a little bit about what that looks like for you.
Yeah, sure. So we follow the CVE.org. Like we are NVIDIA is a CNA, like CVE Numbering Authority, and we align with the MITRE CVE program that is already published. So what that means is like any security vulnerability that we find either internally or externally, we disclose and we assign a CVE ID for it. And how that works is once we get a research, like a report from external researchers, we first, of course, we validate it to make sure we understand the impact and what exactly the security issue, which products are impacted, which versions are impacted, and what is the fix needed to patch that security vulnerability. So usually we assign a CV in a process. We have a automation that is in our process. And once the fix is ready, we start the security advisory and we automatically pull in the CV ID number from the CV services and we assign it to the issue. And then we publish it when we actually have a fix. So that is how it works, which is part of like a coordinated disclosure, which is the industry practices that all companies follow, that we get a fix, we assign a CVID, we disclose the issue as well as the fix, and the CVID is assigned to the actual vulnerability, like Shannon mentioned before. And that is how we follow the process. So it's automated, but usually we try to assign at the very end so that we disclose the fix as well as the issue at the same time, and the CV then is published to MITRE and it then goes to the NVIDIA database. So we assign CVID specifically for issues that are into the NVIDIA proprietary code. Like if we fix something in our code, then we assign a CVID. Also for open source, if we are the primary maintainers of that code, then we assign a CVID and we publish a security advisory in the GitHub page as well. But assign a CVID so that it gets also reported to MITRE and NVIDIA. And also then it can be pulled by the scanning companies or the scanners, and then customers can easily see which products are impacted and they can apply the patches. So that is the general process that we follow. CVID, assigning CVID is definitely one of the important process in this vulnerability management and disclosure steps that we follow at NVIDIA.
You said two things that I want to touch on there. One is that you tend not to assign a CVE until later in the process, nearing the end. I have found that to be common, and I find that to be a reasonable expectation for researchers to have, because I have found that to be common. But you touched on something else that I want to a thread that I want to pull, which is you're talking a little bit about your scope. What code is in NVIDIA's CNA scope to apply CVEs for? And every CNA has a scope, a stated scope that they're going to apply CVEs for vetted vulnerabilities found in, what have you, only their products or their products plus these open source. And then some have some exclusions. Maybe it's end of life product, maybe it's, some other thing, or extended support is sometimes an exclusion. So should we dig in a little bit to end of life products? And, it's not impossible, I guess, to obtain a CVE for an end of life product, but it is excluded by some CNAs. And Milind, you and I have talked about this in the past. For some vendors, it's not feasible to go back to code that you no longer have engineers who are familiar with the code, what have you. It's just not cost effective to be able to do it. Now, that doesn't mean that a researcher couldn't get a CVE from the root or the CNA, pardon, the CNA of last resort. But that is a common exclusion. Milland, do you want to touch on that, or do you want to talk a little bit about NVIDIA's scope?
Yeah, so usually you're right. So this comes all the time. Sometimes we have so many products which have been end of life, and they are still in the field, right? So customers are still using it, but they are end of life. A lot of consumer level products. So we usually try to assign CVE IDs or work on issues for products which are in the field and are supported. So we have a list of products which are end of life. We have clearly posted on some of our main popular products that which are end of life. So those we don't fix. But what we do is we look at those reports, and if we think that these are also applicable to the newer products, then definitely we will take a review of it, and we will try to fix those issues as well for the newer versions or the products that are still supported. But at this point, it is important for the researchers to understand that if the product is end of life, then it is not easy for the vendors to usually go back because the code is not supported. There are engineers not available to work on that code. So the CV assignment doesn't really make sense because there won't be any patch anywhere available. So it is more appropriate to look at the products which are still in support or which are actively supported by the vendor, and then work on those security findings. I think that would be my suggestion. But anyway, even if you have found any issues in the older products, that is also good to report to the company. So the vendor, so they can verify and they can give you the proper advice on the next steps. But in our case, we assign CVE IDs for supported products, and once the issue is confirmed.
I think that's common, but I agree with you. Even, if you find something in an end of life product, still report it. The company may be able to vet, later products, what have you. So it's still worth reporting, but do have your expectations set, when it's end of life, that it may not be something that the company can easily address, or they may not be able, or they may not be willing to address it. That said, I also find extended life to be a term that is confusing to some researchers. Extended support often involves custom support contracts. It does not always mean that all security patches will be applied depending on what those custom contracts will look like. So don't assume that extended life means that it's still serviceable, will get all the security patches. That's not always true in my experience. But again, still, if you see a vulnerability, report the vulnerability. So of course, at the CVE program, we are here to aid security, the whole community, the CNAs and researchers, and get everybody, working well together. And so we hope that this content is helpful to level set expectations and to help get researchers and CNAs and even non-CNA vendors communicating well together about vulnerability research. We hope that this content is helpful. We hope to get people communicating well and working well together. Let us know how we can help you. Let us know if this podcast was helpful to you. And please know, Milland, how much I appreciate you coming and talking to us. I know you have really vast experience, and I personally think you are a wonderful PSIRT leader. And so I'm so glad that you came to talk to us today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. It's always great working with you and coordinating with you in the groups. I want to add one more point, which I missed before. The topics that researchers submit, right, for their conference, we usually also encourage that they provide their findings or their papers to us so we can review them and we can provide them suggestions from a product perspective or architecture perspective. so that they can make accurate statements in their presentations. So that is something we definitely like to give feedback to the finders as well, which can also improve and make their presentations more accurate when they are presenting at some academic conferences or any professional conferences. So that is also great, and we really encourage the researchers to work closely with the vendors and have their security issues report to us, and we can fix them and make the products more secure for the community.
Yeah, I think a lot of researchers don't know, hey, I can give my presentation to the vendor, and they're going to give me really meaningful feedback about that. I have found that to be very helpful. I have found that to be meaningful. And I hope people take advantage of that. I think that's great. And it's I think very kind when a vendor offers to do that. It's not only in the vendor's interest, but I've seen them give really great feedback to researchers, which has made their presentation better too. So I think that's terrific. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shannon.
Please join us again for another episode of the CVE podcast. We'll be back in coming weeks with new topics for CNAs, for researchers, and for consumers of CVE. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on the We Speak CVE podcast, which is available for free on Buzzsprout and the CVE website. If you'd like to participate or suggest a topic, please contact us on the CVE website.